Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. It's great to be here with you today. My name is Sydney Daniello. I'm the Public Policy Manager of Projects and Events at Mental Health America, and I will be your moderator for this session today, talking about mental health and coping with autoimmune disease. In addition to being in the mental health field, I myself am also living with Crohn's disease, and I'm really grateful to be able to bring that lived experience perspective today. I'm joined today by a really fantastic panel, and I'm going to let them tell you all a little bit about themselves before we kick things off. So, Katie, can we start with you and then jump to Ebony and then Morgan?
Sure. Hi. Thank you. It's really nice to be here. My name's Katie Willard-Verant. I am a psychotherapist working from St. Louis. I also live with Crohn's disease. I've had Crohn's since I was 18. And when I became a therapist, I realized that I had this lived experience that I could use to help other people who are also living with illness. There's a real need for that. I think we pay attention to the body, but in our culture, there's still such a disconnect between the body and mind. So I like in my work to bridge those two together. I also write a column monthly for Psychology Today about chronic illness. It's called Chronically Me, and it addresses a lot of different mental health topics to do with illness.
Awesome. Ebony, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Ebony Jean. I am a patient advocate for the National Alopecia Areata Foundation. I am from Michigan, and I've had alopecia since the age of 4. Over the course of my life, I've dealt with a lot of mistreatment and things, but just walking into my purpose a few years ago, I found out that I was not alone, and I'm able to use my voice and platform to help others throughout our community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Morgan?
Hello, everyone. As Sydney said, my name is Morgan Green. I am a Spoonie wellness coach and chronic illness content creator. I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, or MG, in 2016, and that first year was really, really difficult for me, both physically and mentally. So I began blogging as a way to kind of just vent and work through all those changes and emotions. And not only did I begin to feel better over time, but I also found the Spoonie community and so many people who related to my words or felt like I was able to put into word what they themselves had been struggling with. So my platform is just really dedicated to those who are looking to navigate the ups and downs of chronic illness while maintaining mental wellness. And I just really have a passion for helping women living with chronic illness reclaim their lives through self exploration, self reflection, and self love.
Thank you all so much for sharing a little bit about yourselves. It's really such an honor to be speaking with you all today. I think we should just jump in with some of the questions that I have for you all today. So we know that boundary setting is really important to maintaining both our physical and our mental well-being living with autoimmune disorders. So what are some of the ways you set those mental, physical, and emotional boundaries with others or even with yourself in order to practice self-care, manage your disease, and also maintain your overall mental well-being? Katie, why don't we just go in the order that we went in before? Katie, can I start with you?
Sure, absolutely. I think boundaries work is so important because it's really a paradigm shift. It's a whole shift. So many of us walk through the world thinking, not even knowing, right? It's like the air we breathe. I got to make her happy. I got to make him happy. Oops, I'm looking at her face. She looks like she's not happy. What can I do to make it better? That's the soundtrack that goes through our minds. And what boundaries work does is flip that script and think about, well, what makes me happy? What's working for me? It's changing the assumption from I have a responsibility to take care of everybody else's feelings and needs to I have a responsibility to take care of my feelings and needs. And if you're listening to this and you think, oh my God, that sounds so selfish, then you need boundaries work. It changes everything. And I think for people living with chronic illness, it is about setting boundaries with ourselves, sort of knowing what energy we have for a particular day, accepting that some days we're going to have more energy than others, and being able to set limits around the things that we provide for other people, even in our work situations. And also setting boundaries with other people, that other people want things from us. And that's great. People can, one of my favorite sayings when I'm struggling with setting my own boundaries is people can want and I can say no. And that no is not a dirty word. So I think it's a really rich, again, it flips the script and changes everything. And I think it helps in two ways. One, to preserve that energy and allow us better choices of what's important to us. We have limited energy. What do we want to spend time on? But I think good boundary setting, when it becomes a practice, also changes the feeling of felt safety in our body. We're not moving through the world going, oh my gosh, what are people going to need from me? Because we have an assurance that we are able to set those boundaries, that people are not going to be able to take from us what we don't want to give.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point, and I really like that idea of flipping the script and honoring the responsibility we have to ourselves. Ebony, do you want to jump in here?
Absolutely. One thing that I've been relearning lately is that you cannot please everyone. So many people are going to have various opinions about your condition and and they try to control how you respond to it. A lot of people were dismissive towards me about my feelings with having hair loss, and it's become such a taboo topic, especially amongst women. They tell us, oh, you can't feel depressed, you can't be sad about that, but for everyone else, it's okay. And in the alopecia community, we have been taught it's okay not to be okay. I didn't really recognize how this affected me mentally until getting older. So, amongst my peers in high school and other times in grade school, I found myself very depressed. But I did keep busy. I stayed active in different activities and things. But deep down, I was masking my pain. And it's not good to mask your pain. So, whenever people try to ask questions or pry into your personal business, unless you are comfortable and have a trusting relationship with that person, you don't have to share it. It's totally okay. And you have to acknowledge, that I'm sad. I'm not feeling the greatest today. One minute I'm up, the next minute I'm down. You just have to be real and honest with yourself, and also teaching others to respect your boundaries. I don't want to talk about this right now, or I don't feel like I'm in a place where I'm comfortable to share this with you at the moment. So when the time is right, I will let you know. A lot of people have tried pressuring me into telling them how I feel about different things when they were the very same people who went back and shared my personal information with others that I don't know about. So I think we've all had those experiences, but you just have to be honest with who you are, and just setting those boundaries and making sure that people respect them.
Absolutely. And being able to set those boundaries until you feel like you've built trust with others, that sounds like it's really helpful in being able to share appropriately without draining yourself. Morgan, I would love to hear your thoughts on this also.
So one of the things that I feel kind of grateful for having my illness is that it has taught me the importance of boundaries. So boundaries are something that we all have, but a lot of us aren't good at setting, and we're even worse at like enforcing. And I feel like this is especially true when you have an autoimmune condition, because it's like this innate thing within us that makes us feel like we have to overextend ourselves in order to prove our worth and our value, because our bodies are a little different. Um, and I noticed very early on in my illness journey that every time I overextended myself, I regretted it immediately. Like my body made me pay for it. Mentally, I was just exhausted. It was just like, why did I do this to myself? And once, I believe, like Katie said about making it a practice, once I started to make self care a practice, I felt a shift. So I did so in small bites. That would be my advice. Do so in small bites so it's not so overwhelming. For me, that started with making dates with myself, and keeping them. So it's something so small that's like, oh, I'm going to meditate for a minute a day, or I'm going to walk around the block, like something for yourself. You put it on your calendar and you don't put it by the wayside. Because I think of it as like, if your boss or your supervisor has a meeting at 11, you're going to be there at 11. You're not going to push it aside because that's a priority. Um, And so realizing that I had to prioritize self-care, that I'm worthy of that time, that, I just do everything I can to just give back to me as much as I'm trying to give back to everyone else in my life was a major first step. One of the things that I like to do every year is like a little self-love challenge. And for like a month, I set aside time to like really journal and write affirmations every single day. And then once you realize that, hey, I did this for a full month, now you get to choose bigger milestones to hit or bigger ventures to do. Um, spending time getting to know yourself. And once you know yourself, you're more comfortable setting boundaries with other people. Saying no, because no is a full sentence. I know people, you say no, you think you have to give them a reason why. It's just no. That's just it. And learning not to feel guilty because I can't make an event or I just don't want to because I have a lot going on. Or even just the boundary of owning your story and not feeling shame and not allowing other people to place their ideals on what you should be doing and how you should be feeling on you.
Absolutely. It really sounds like for you, not only is boundary setting a way to practice other forms of self-care, but boundary setting is the self-care. And that's a really important thing to take away from this. And similarly to what you were saying, not allowing other people's expectations of you and things like that to get in the way of the time and the energy that you need to dedicate for yourself is really important. And our next question is sort of related to that, is related to managing other people. And so obviously we all have our own responses and reactions to managing our illnesses and our disorders. But something we don't always talk about is managing the responses of other people to our illnesses. So what have your experiences been like managing other people's responses to your chronic illness? And how have these responses sort of impacted your mental health? And sorry for the million questions, but what are some ways that you're able to mitigate those responses and help them not impact your mental health so much? And also feel free to jump in with each other. I think it's easy to go in the order that we've been going in, but please respond to each other if you have something to say, because I know you all just have really incredible perspectives on this. So Katie, you want to start with this?
Sure. I think it is so related to boundary setting. Again, this idea of putting your own feelings front and center. I'm thinking, I think many people, especially at the beginning of their illness journey, there's a discomfort and a sense of, almost, ooh, did they really say that? Am I allowed to feel the way that I felt about that? They must not have meant it. I'm just going to move on. And as time goes on and in doing some of the self-care and boundary setting that we've been talking about, there's a sense that we are, of course, entitled to our feelings about our illness and other people's perceptions of it and the ways that they communicate those perceptions to us. So that said, I think when you feel the icky feeling, I always tell my clients, like, pay attention to the icky feeling. Like, so often we get an icky feeling in our body and we push it aside and go, oh, I must be sensitive, or, oh, they didn't mean it. No, 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 no. Slow down. Pay attention to that feeling. It's telling you something. And I think that the way that people respond to our explication of our icky feeling says a lot about how this relationship might go. I think it's important to say, if someone says something about our illness or illness experience, like, ugh, I'm not sure how that's sitting with me, I'd like to talk about that. Or if we know how it's sitting with us, to say, yeah, that doesn't feel so great to me, and here's why. And if someone can then respond and really listen and say, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. I see that now. That's a great moment, right? You feel seen, they feel seen. There's a sense that things go forward. Now, it doesn't always happen. What sometimes happens is somebody gets really defensive and says, oh, I didn't mean it like that, or you're just being sensitive, or, oh, I can't say anything then. And then you have to think about what you want to do, right? For me, I've made the decision, life is short. There's lots of great people out there. I'm not particularly interested in developing a close relationship with somebody that's going to do that. If it's a family member, someone that you have other ties to that you don't want to kind of cut all ties to, what you can do is say to them, this doesn't work for us when we discuss my illness. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for you. We get frustrated. So we can talk about other things, but this is not going to be a topic that works for us. I think being really confident about that people don't have the right to make you feel bad about your experience. They can have their feelings, but they can keep those feelings to themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think it's really great that you connected it back to that boundary setting and really being firm in what you will and will not accept as other people's reactions from your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Ebony, would you want to jump in on this?
Absolutely. I agree 100% with Katie. I've dealt with a lot of people who have given backhanded compliments, if you will. They will say, well, oh, you're beautiful bald, but at least it's not cancer. It's just certain things that you don't say. And my experiences with people is half positive, half negative. Some people, they show their compassion, they show support. Others, they over sympathize or they would immediately connect it to cancer. In fact, the disease cancer by itself does not cause hair loss. It's the medicine released in chemotherapy, respectfully. And this is one thing that we tend to get comparisons with from the within the alopecia community, excuse me. So it can be very frustrating, sometimes explaining to people what alopecia is and how it affects our livelihood. But don't dismiss our condition just because it's not life threatening. We have to go through a lot of altering situations. I remember getting my hat snatched off going to school. Kids would walk up behind me, yanking at my wig to see if it would come off. And at that moment, they didn't realize how it made me feel. And when I tried explaining to people, that doesn't make me feel good when you do that, or when you say certain things that, can come off offensive. You might not mean any harm, but a lot of times people don't realize what they say before they say it. They just start talking. So you just have to establish boundaries with people and the way you address them and how they address you. Don't let anyone tell you how to feel, because no one knows going through this condition um, more than the people themselves. So I was the only kid in my family who had alopecia growing up. And a lot of people just made very off the wall comments about me. They said very disrespectful things to myself and my mother. And it was just really messed up because at the time people didn't know of alopecia. So they just ran with a narrative, and instead of talking to us and trying to get information, unless you're helping us, I would prefer not to have that conversation, because people, let's just call it for what it is. They can be nosy, and people people sometimes they overstep their boundaries. So it's okay to say no. Just like she said, it's no is a complete sentence, just like what Morgan said, it's a complete sentence. And I agree with that. You can't answer every question, you can't be there for everybody, you can't please everyone. So yeah, it's just all about how you handle it, and also handle it with grace.
Well, it sounds like setting those boundaries for you and also for you, Katie, is a really important way to just sort of make sure that your focus is on your own self and you're able to handle just your own reactions to your illness, because that is enough. Spending energy on other people and the way that they're responding is just not something like that will take away from our mental health. So to be able to say, I love that. No is a complete sentence, Morgan. That was really great. I think that's a really great way of handling other people's reactions. It's just like, no, we're not going to talk about that right now. I think that's a really, really great advice. Morgan, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, definitely. So I know in the beginning of my journey, I struggled a lot with putting on a mask, that I'm okay mask. So the minute I left my house, I had to be okay, even though the minute I stepped back in the house, I was a complete mess. Like I was crying, I was miserable, and just in this anxious bubble. And I realized that I did this for a lot of reasons. One, I just felt like I had to be strong for my family and for my loved ones, which is crazy, right? Because this is happening to me, but I want to make sure everyone else is okay. So I stuff my emotions inside, which isn't healthy. And then, in the thick of, everything happening, I remember my family, they actually had a conversation behind my back about who was going to move in with me because they just felt like this was too much for me to handle without any consent from me. This is just how they decided that, something major was happening. And while they meant well, they didn't include me in the decision making. It was just, oh my gosh, this is happening. We need to, do this. And it took some of that control away from me. Like, I need to process this. This is my moment. And so having that conversation, like, hey guys, thank you, but we're not there yet. I will let you know when we're there if we get there. But for right now, everyone just cool your jets. And then also, I felt like most people really didn't want to know how I was really doing. You know how some people just ask, hey, how's your day? And then you say, well, I had this test come back horrible and that test come back horrible and I'm feeling this way. That can be kind of a burden. And I didn't want to project that burden onto other people. I felt like I was a burden to them by letting them know what was really going on with me. So I isolated and it was just, I'm okay. Oh, I'm handling it. Um, and then I also realized that a lot of it was my own thoughts about what it meant to have an illness. And like, I didn't want people to pity me or shame me for that, or even those people who will minimize what I'm going through, like Ebony and Katie said, like by trying to compare it or giving a nice little story about someone they know who had XYZ and how, water and yoga cured it for them. And just, the things that people say that aren't really helpful, but they're just trying. But it doesn't really help. And so I learned basically over the years that I have to discern. Number one, um, having a support system or a group of people that I can really keep it real with, like who can really handle my reality and I can share what's going on with me, but I still honor what my needs are and knowing, okay, this person, I can't give them every full detail because they'll get a little bit too excited, but I can share a little bit of what's going on because they can handle it versus the person that, you can tell them the nitty gritty and they're able to handle it and not project anything and just have an open dialogue. Like that's a safe space to be. And then there are still some people that I just say, oh, I'm hanging in there because I know that I also don't have to be an open book for everybody. I don't owe everyone my story or my truth. That's not something that they're entitled to. I mean, also through like journaling, I've learned a lot of self-validation. Like I don't need any doctor or friend or family member to validate my experience or my symptoms. I give myself that permission to have my good days, to have my bad days on this journey, and that's enough for me. And I would encourage everyone to learn that practice. Like, don't look for your family members to really understand. If they don't understand, sometimes it's beyond their wheelhouse, and that's okay.
Well, I think being willing to just take up that space and find the situations where you can say, I'm not doing well today. Today was a rough one, and not feel like you need to say things like, oh, it's not as bad as it seems. And sometimes you can say, oh, it's not as bad as it seems. It's worse. And finding the people who can handle that, and being willing to like be honest with yourself and other people when you can, is a really great way to sort of just manage all of the weight and the burden that we have to carry living with these kinds of illnesses. I want to move on to the last question I have for you all today, which is about trauma. So I spoke to a colleague of mine quite a while ago about living with chronic illness. And she said something that really resonated with me that might resonate with you all as well, which is that living with a chronic illness is a lifetime of accumulated trauma. So how does trauma tie into your experiences with living with your disease? And what are some of the ways that you've found to best manage trauma and triggers when they come up or avoid them entirely? Katie, you want to start?
Sure. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I do agree that living with chronic illness is a series of accumulated traumas. The hard thing is too, often with trauma work with people, we try to distinguish like a one-time trauma or child that was in the past. This is the present. You're safe in the present. It's a little different with chronic illness because your body, it just keeps giving, right? So that's a challenging twist that we can't say this is in the past. It's not. It continues in the present. But I do find that a lot of principles of trauma work are really important in working with chronic illness. For one, trauma lives in the body, it expresses itself in the body. It can express itself in a lot of ways, but one way that I see a lot of in autoimmune diseases, especially, is hypervigilance, a sense of being on guard, being alert. Just like you hear about like PTSD from someone being in war, that they'd be sensitive to loud noises. I think with chronic illness, people are very sensitive to their bodies. Is this a regular ache? Is this a symptom? What's going on here? Your body then is operating. If this is we have a concept in psychotherapy called window of tolerance. It's where things are going well. You're just relaxed enough. It's the sweet spot. I think a lot of people with chronic illness operate above the sweet spot. Their bodies and their minds are constantly churning, going, etc. So a lot of the work is how to take that down, how to take that hypervigilance down and get it back into the sweet spot. And body work's super important, like finding a way to connect to your body that isn't about the pain that our bodies give us, finding ways to find pleasure in our body, finding ways through breath work, through meditation, through gentle movement, trauma-informed yoga, to feel that our bodies are also the site of power, of information, that we can, so feeling safer in the body. I also think that good trauma work involves a lot of grief work, grieving for the losses that trauma has created. So I think that's really important. I know that's been touched upon here, of making space for all the emotions, for not just, oh, aren't I a good soldier soldiering through this terrible situation, but for the anger, the grief, that's really important. I think anybody who is thinking about going into therapy, and I do think therapy is a really important adjunct when you live with chronic illness, I think seeing a therapist who is trauma informed is really important. Again, the body, the mind, the cognition, it's trauma involves the whole self. So all of those parts need to come into treatment.
Definitely. Ebony, I would love to hear a little bit about your experiences with this.
I can think of a few stories. One in particular, there were two high school classmates of mine who at the time decided to make a video and, just talking about me and saying really negative things, derogatory, disrespectful about myself and my family. That took me back to a very traumatizing place. A lot of people growing up didn't realize my actual condition. And so I just ran into one of the gentlemen a few years ago. And the sweet part about this is that he apologized for his actions. And it doesn't dismiss what they've done, but part of my self-care is forgiving people, and sometimes we can harbor in all of that hurt and anger. Yes, we process it, but for my peace of mind, I decided to forgive him so that I can move on with my life. um a lot of people, they don't realize how they make you feel or how their actions affect you until you bring it to their attention. And so just all of that traumatizing events, along with getting my hat snatched off while riding the school bus home, I stopped riding the bus for a long time until I made the decision to go back. And I didn't really understand why I made that decision, but I did anyway. So yeah, you just have to acknowledge how things affect you mentally, emotionally. And I know this is a very huge topic that has taken part of 2022. A lot of people have talked about this for a while, but the infamous Oscar incident. Now, a lot of people have messaged me asking, how do you feel about that? And does she really have alopecia? I said, yes, she does have alopecia. It looks differently to everyone. All of us have different variations of the condition, but don't dismiss it just because you see only 10% of the story. You only know 10% of it. So she said that this is my healing season. Also, this is my time to really get to know myself, and also just becoming friends with alopecia, because I'm no longer going to let this condition define who I am or steal the way that I live my life, because you can live in abundance, you can be joyful and look at things from a different perspective. Yeah, so healing, journaling. I love journaling. I love going for walks. I also love having a great support system. That's really important in the alopecia community. So we have a lot of support groups that meet up and we talk about how different situations affect our everyday life and how we can support and encourage one another.
Well, it's really powerful to hear you talk about forgiveness as part of healing from those traumas, and then of course all of the other strategies that you've used to try to deal with that and move on is really powerful to hear. Before we wrap up, Morgan, I would love to hear your perspective on this.
Absolutely. Um, I feel like a major disservice is done in the autoimmune community because we don't have enough conversations about trauma. It's more so, especially from the perspective of your doctor, focusing on the body, not focusing on the mental effects and the impact that this happened. Because this is honestly a major life altering event. Like one day you went to bed perfectly healthy, and the next day you woke up and your life has been changed. So you're tainted in so many ways, be it developing like white coat syndrome from the stress of going through like the diagnostic process, all the tests and the probing, or something simple like feeling anxiety every time, like Katie mentioned, like, oh, is this a new symptom? Or is it the beginning of a crisis? Or is this a whole new illness on the brink? For me personally, I noticed that like in the days leading up to any type of doctor appointment, I start to feel anxiety. Like I'm irritable, I don't sleep well because subconsciously I'm worried about going into this appointment and coming out with more life-changing news. But knowing that information for myself is helpful because if I know that upcoming doctor appointments are a trigger for me, I'm going to use different tactics to self regulate and kind of counter leading up to that appointment to kind of bring myself back to like an equilibrium and a peace. So, some of the things that I've used to address my trauma, like Ebony mentioned, like journaling, self reflection, meditation, and Katie talked about therapy. I found an amazing therapist. Shout out to you. And working through some of those different things that I don't even think about or haven't come up for myself until she mentions it. And I'm like, oh, that might be true. Asking myself, why do I feel this way? Analyzing and just getting to know my triggers, playing around with the different ways to reset myself. So one of the things I have is like a joy list. These are things that are like big and small that I can do for myself to bring myself joy in the midst of chaos, or like a gratitude list. So finding things to be grateful for in the midst of everything going completely haywire, and just reflecting on the many times that like I've overcome these obstacles in my life to get me where I am today. Like those are just small things. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but just little things that you can do for yourself to kind of bring yourself a little bit of peace in the midst as you're working through your traumas.
That is incredible advice. And it's just been really powerful and insightful to hear from all of you today. We are fresh out of time, but I do want to take a second just to thank our panelists today for your vulnerability and for sharing your stories with me and with our audience. And I want to thank all the participants watching for joining us and being part of this amazing session. So with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. It was really great to be here with you all, and have a great rest of the afternoon. Thank you.